great Saturday. Today is a special day, my friends, and I'm so glad to see so many people on. Adrian is here. I see Tom and
Bonjour.
Alex also here. Uh,
Bonjour.
Tom and Alex, we have 60 members right now. Members from
Amazing.
both communities. This is amazing. We see people from all over the place. Today we have a special guest in our workshops. Usually on Saturday we have beginner intermediate masterclass, but today we have a special guest. We have Adrian Leeds. I'm going to introduce her later, but I see Tom and Alex. I know you guys are busy, so I want to open the floor and let you, Tom and Alex, welcome today all the members.
Thank you. Thank you. Merci tout le monde d'être venu. Thanks everyone for coming. Adrian, I know you're super busy. I know, obviously, with everything you're doing on the side, I really appreciate you taking the time on a Saturday evening to join us here at the French Club.
Oh, thank you for asking me. It's really a pleasure. It's my favorite subject.
Thank you so
No,
much.
thank you.
Thank you for coming.
All the club members are super excited. We've been talking about it all week. So yeah, honestly, we can start at any point. I don't know if Adrian, maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit to the 80 Frenchies Club. So for the ones who might not know you, at least know you now.
Well, I have actually a little bio for Adrian
Okay.
because plates
I like that,
are
Gigi. Okay.
really great. So Adrienne was born and raised in Louisiana. She attended the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City, spent some time in Israel, also started her career in Tennessee and then California, and then the magic number. In 94, she moved to Paris with her family for a one-year sabbatical, and she never left.
Yes, this is true.
That's amazing.
Adrian, it has been 30 years. Your company, Adrian Leeds Group, is a licensed real estate agency and offering complete property consultation services, primarily for North Americans who want to live and invest in France. And Adrian really much considered the premier property expert in France for the North American community. And of course, we know Adrian from the HGTV show House Hunters International. You have filmed more than 50 episodes, Adrian.
As a matter of fact, I'm about to film my 58th episode in a couple of weeks. Thank you. And our 57th is going to air on Tuesday night.
There you go. Where are we going
sure.
Tuesday night? Is it Paris?
Yes, it was filmed in Paris, but it was filmed last June. So it was quite a nice surprise to get the email today saying it was going to be airing this coming week.
Right before the Olympics.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait to see that one.
Must have been fun.
Sorry, Gigi, go ahead.
Tom and Alex, would you like to introduce the club? Because we have a lot of members also who are members of Adrian's community.
Of course. Well, so the 80 Frenchies Club was created now 2 years ago. The 80 Frenchies Club, is a community of Francophiles from all around the world with level ranging from A1 to C2. How the club works is there is daily sessions with a native French teacher like Gigi, who's right here, covering topics on cultural, Gigi, if I'm not wrong, on Tuesday. And then you have grammatical, and then you also have the pronunciation that you don't like to call pronunciation anymore.
We switched to literature.
Literature, yeah, we switched to literature. Tom hosts office hours every Thursday. I host debate conversational class on Friday. Gigi hosts a big masterclass for beginner and intermediate this Saturday, and Tom and I do a fun masterclass every Sunday where we talk about different topics, and the first hour is beginner and the second is intermediate. There's so much to talk about when it comes to the club, but I won't bother you too long on that. Adrian, you're the star of today, so please.
I would like to say that I feel really privileged, okay, because I saw your interview with Emmanuel Macron. And so that, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm like with your group, the group that has wow.
You're more important than Macron, honestly, trust me. No, yeah, it was such an amazing time. Filming with Macron and Justin Trudeau last year was definitely a highlight of 80 Frenchies. But being with people like you, Adrian, is also what makes 80 Frenchies so much fun and so unique in a good way, because we get to connect with, Francophiles like you and everybody that's on today's Zoom. So that's why I'm excited to talk for a little bit, and then Tom and I have to head to a garden brunch because we're in Washington, D.C. for the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which we're not diving into politics. It's a non-partisan dinner Okay, and to talk about journalism, and then I still cannot say that word. I don't know why. But yeah, that's why we have to leave a little early today. But we'll watch the recording, and if there's anything we can do, any question we can answer, please feel free to reach out. Okay.
Thank you guys so much, and thank you for inviting me. And Gigi, thank you for doing that intro. That's really wonderful. And I'll do a little bit myself as well. But we're going to talk about culture.
Amazing. That's
I
what
love
we love to
culture.
talk about.
Culture, right.
So thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure all mine. I think what I'm going to go ahead and do, though, is Gigi, this is a good time for me to share my screen and my PowerPoint,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so
Go ahead,
let's
Adrian.
go ahead and do that. Hang on one sec while I figure out how all this works. No, that's not it. That's not it. Here we go. That's it. Yay. Okay, let me put this away so I can see it. This is a presentation that I have done a few different times, but not many. And I've reorganized it, especially for this particular presentation with AT Frenchies. And I really am privileged to be here. I just want to tell you a little bit about us, first and foremost. If I can figure out how to work my screen. There we go. There we go. We are property consultants. We think of ourselves as French property the American way. We are a licensed real estate agency in France, and we offer quite a wide variety of services, everything from soup to nuts. We do property consultation. We search for properties, whether for rental or for purchase. We can do sales and listings. We can assist someone in purchasing or selling a property, which is slightly different than a search or a listing. We can do appraisals. We have resources of all sorts, including financing, and we have resources for renovation and decoration. So we're sort of your all-round go-to agency in France. And the reason that we exist, and I'm not going to get into much detail on that, but the main reason that we exist is because there's no multiple listing service in France. And because there's no multiple listing service, it's almost impossible you can't go to one agency and find all properties. You really need someone who's going to not only help you find the properties, but protect you, because the listing agents only protect the seller, not the buyer. And we can certainly talk about that in the Q&A. I am not here to talk about real estate today. I am here to talk about crossing the cultural divide. You know, as Gigi said in the beginning, I came on a one-year sabbatical and never left. That was more than 30 years ago, and I know a lot of people that happens to. I'm certainly not the only one. And I came on a visitor visa. I didn't have the right to work for the first 10 years that I was in France. I left my husband 3 years in. I left with nothing. I left with no money, no job, no ability to work. It was probably a pretty stupid thing to do, but I couldn't leave France. And so I had to find a way to earn that living. And as a result of everything I went through, I'm alive and well here today with a thriving business, which really does my heart good, because what we do, way more than property, is actually help people fulfill their dreams. We make their dreams come true by helping them cross the cultural divide, cross the ocean, come over, find a place to live, find a new life that is much richer and more rewarding than the one they had. So I get a lot of good feeling every single day. And I do believe that the toughest part of making that move is not the physical aspects of making that move, but actually crossing the cultural divide. This is lesson number 1. And you know, this is not a lesson you're going to read anywhere else but right here with me. I don't know that this is really written about by all of the people who write about culture, but I discovered it when a diplomat told me the difference between Napoleonic English law. learned is that with Napoleonic Code, everything which is not allowed is forbidden. And with English law, everything which is not forbidden is allowed. So what does that mean? That means that in the US that has English law, you know what you can't do. You can't steal, you can't kill, you can't do this, you can't do that. But everything else is possible. And that's a very open-minded way of looking at life and law, and very outside of the box thinking. But with Napoleonic Code, you have to follow the rules, and everything outside of that is forbidden. So, you know, that's very in the box thinking. And when I learned this, it was like a light bulb going off in my head, and I understood that every cultural clash I'd ever come across had to do with this fundamental difference between us, that we are just night and day. And I sort of equate it to being put in a straitjacket and then being asked to perform somersaults. I'll give you a couple of examples. Children are given a line drawing to color in. And in America, you can do anything you want. You can totally color outside the lines. And the more creative, the better. We think that's just fabulous artistic behavior. But in France, if you don't color within the lines, you will get a bad grade for that. You are taught to absolutely follow the rules. I'm going to tell you one small story that really did happen to me. In the US, my daughter's teacher said, when she was very little, she said, I want you to just write, have fun, be creative. Don't worry about grammar or spelling or punctuation or any of those things. And then we got to France, and my 8-year-old daughter went to school, and the teacher said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have what's called dictée. I'm going to recite a sentence, and you're going to write it down exactly the way it should be written, with all of the punctuation and spelling to be perfect. And I swear I did this. I raised my hand in a parent-teacher meeting, and I said, excuse me, but how does that benefit my child? I couldn't understand how that was going to make my child a better person. And at that moment, I understood how acute our differences really are. Now, one of the other things I learned how to do was live in what we call the gray area. It's what we call here in France. You know, we're very honest people, Americans. We cut down George Washington cut down a cherry tree and said, I cannot tell a lie. And basically, Honest Abe and all of that. And so we just don't know how to actually live in the gray area. But the French, okay, they sort of see things in a bigger picture. Let me go to the next slide. You guys are so quiet. Is everybody out there?
We're here.
We're
You're
here.
here?
Yes.
Good, because I'm doing my
We're here.
presentation.
Yes.
I don't hear comments from the peanut gallery, so I want to make
We're
sure
all
that
muted.
good. You're muted. Okay. So if you've never heard of System D, which stands for being débrouillé or débrouillard, it means to unfog or untangle a situation. And the French, this really exists here. They have learned how to get around their system by virtue of being clever and around their rules and regulations. So I'm going to give you an example or two. Let's take a rental apartment. To rent a short-term apartment in Paris, you can only do that if you are a primary resident of that apartment, and you are only allowed 4 months a year of rentals. So what do people do? They claim it as their primary residence, but then they go live with their boyfriend or their friend or their parents, and they leave that apartment vacant for rental. So they have to get kind of clever in order to get around the rules. Okay, I'll give you one other small example. The préfecture might tell you that for your visa application, you have to have a translation that has to be no more than 90 days old. But what if it's 91 or 92 days old? What if it's maybe even another month old? You don't want to have to go back and have it translated again. It's the same translation because it could be very expensive to do that translation. A French person wouldn't think twice about just changing the date because the only thing that fonctionnaire cares about is fulfilling their obligation to have a properly dated document. So we might feel really weird about that, whereas they would say, you know what, that's system D, that's the way I'm going to get around this. And that's called living in the gray area. And so I contend that if you cannot feel comfortable being in the gray area from time to time, you're going to have a harder time moving through this culture than you might think. Oh, let's talk about capitalism versus socialism. France has a mixed economic system. It's actually elements of both capitalism and socialism, and it's considered a socialist democracy, whereas the US is really purely a capitalist society. This means that profit is what motivates everyone. The idea is to always make the most money. Americans fear the word socialism, and the French fear the word capitalism, just like we fear socialism. But the French do not talk about money. They sort of see money as the root of all evil, whereas we see the idea that money can buy happiness. And the idea that money can lead to all sorts of negative outcomes, such as greed, selfishness, and unethical behavior. And in the US, we sort of feel that we need to get richer and richer because that's going to buy our happiness. Here, you do not discuss money. And because money is evil and the way they feel about money, it really is what leads to what we view as bad customer service. Because imagine that in the US, since we revere money, that if you're in a sales position, then you have a high regard for yourself, and other people do too, because you're out there making money. But in France, since money is evil, salespeople don't actually feel very good about themselves. Dealing with money is not very highly regarded. So I think this contributes to the fact that we think that customer service isn't very good. One of the other reasons that we don't see customer service as being very important in France, again, is because of the rules and regulations. They have to follow the rules and regulations, and sometimes the fact that it's more important to take care of the customer is not more important than following the rules and regulations. So if you take every culture clash that you've ever experienced in France and go back to the original rule, which has to do with the difference between our two legal systems, I think you'll find that's the bottom line reason for all of that. And it took me a long time to understand this until I really saw that as long as the French are following their rules, they're comfortable. And it doesn't matter that, we need to fix this customer service problem over here. But how do I do that? Because then I'm not following the rules. Now, there's a couple of books out there that can really help you get through this. One of them is called Demystifying the French by Janet Hallstrand. I think I saw Janet, as a matter of fact, as one of the participants here. And maybe at the very end, we can get her to say a few things. Her book is great. It'll really help you through the day-to-day problems that you might encounter. Notice this little sign on the wall. If you say un café, it's going to cost you €7. If you say un café s'il vous plaît, it'll cost you a little less. But if you say bonjour, un café s'il vous plaît, it'll cost you almost nothing. The reason for that, okay, has to do with the Bonjour Effect, which is another book I recommend. It's a book by Jean-Benoit Nadeau and Julie Barlow. And they are a couple of French people. They're Quebecois. They've written several really interesting books. This one focuses on how language and culture are related. And according to Jean-Benoit and Julie, bonjour is not really just a word. It doesn't really mean hello. It's really what they call a phatic word, which in effect says, hello, I'm in your presence. Do you accept me? And I can tell you that if you do not say bonjour before you speak, you will not be responded to. You will not be acknowledged. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the BHV department store in Paris, and I would just automatically say, excusez-moi, or excusez-moi de vous déranger, without saying bonjour. And the salesperson will stop. Usually, I don't know if you can see me, cross their arms and say, bonjour, madame, and they will reprimand me for not having said bonjour first. So I can tell you that you have to always say bonjour. Always, 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 always burn this into your brain. Another small hint on being treated really well is when you go into a cafe, of course you're going to say bonjour first, but don't just take a table. Don't just take a seat anywhere. Make sure that you say bonjour, monsieur, bonjour, madame. May I have this table over here? And as long as you do that, and you show that you respect them and this is their home, then you will be treated very, very well. Now, another interesting factor that happens here in France is that their organizational charts differ from ours. Ours are generally pyramidal and theirs are generally star. So what that means is the head of the company is at the top of our pyramid, and the power filters its way down all the way to the bottom of the pyramid. But that is not true in France. It's a star system. So the head of the organization is in the middle, and all the workers report to that person. And that means that the worker, which is maybe who you're dealing with, maybe it's that salesperson, they have no power without going back to the responsable, or the person who's in charge. And so this also affects customer service and how we view that. And it certainly affects the way we interact and the way we work, just even in the workplace. So this will give you an example of that. In France, of course, you see its circular pattern. That's the étoile. There are 12 streets that all meet in the middle at the Arc de Triomphe, and somehow the cars come in and circle and go out again very, very effectively. Meanwhile, in the US, we have a grid pattern with an intersection, and you have to stop and wait for the other cars to go past before you can go through that intersection. And that's the way our linear society works versus France. Completely different idea. I've seen a few traffic circles in the US, and they do not work. We do not know how to go in circles, that is for sure. It's rather an interesting phenomenon. Here we go, safety. I hate this slide. I think I'm going to get rid of it because this, shows the number of mass shootings in 1 year. It was rather insane, and of course that's because of the whole gun culture. It's really interesting because the French actually created the idea of pacifism and the word pacifist, and they don't have the right to bear arms. They have a very large gun culture, but it's for hunting, and it's highly regulated. And so you really don't need to fear people having guns on the street. In fact, the biggest crime in the country is pickpocketing, and it's not dangerous. Certainly not dangerous to you. They target tourists, so I want to warn you. I think everyone I know has been pickpocketed at one point or another. I was pickpocketed the first year I was here, but never again, because again, they sort of target people who don't look like they know where they're going or look like tourists. But I don't think you have to worry about safety. pretty much anywhere in any city in France. Certainly not on the same level that it is in the United States. It's one of the things I always feared about living in the United States, and especially as a single woman, I can go anywhere at any time of any day and feel 100% safe. I've never been paranoid, not once. And it's a big plus. It's a tremendous plus to live in a place where I really do feel completely safe. One of the things that's interesting is that we, as Americans, tend to provide a lot of information. We sort of presuppose what questions someone might ask and be ready to answer them even before they ask them, which is the complete opposite here. If you don't ask the right question, you aren't going to get the right answer. And I use this slide to show a pharmacist because I was in Nice and I needed to have a prescription filled, and the prescription was there was a rupture de stock, meaning they were out of it. And I went to 6 different pharmacies asking for the same prescription until I realized, wait a minute, I'm in France and I have not asked the right question. When I got to the sixth pharmacy, I asked the pharmacist, I said, so if you don't have it, where do you think I can find it? And she said, oh, let me look. And she got on her computer and found that there was another pharmacy on the other side of town that had it. And she asked them to hold it for me, and I would go pick it up a few days later. And lo and behold, I got my prescription. But until I remembered this simple rule that you don't get the answer unless you ask the right question, you know, you just I've been here 30 years, but there are times I just am still not crossing the cultural divide correctly. Smiling, we smile, we smile, we smile all the time. We smile so much that those smiles are embedded in our faces. Our facial lines are always up. The French do not have the same smiley culture, and they sort of think that we just look silly since we're smiling for no reason at all. But I don't want anybody to stop smiling, okay? It's okay if they think you're Americans. I don't have a problem with it. Obviously, I'm very smiley. I don't apologize for it. But also, there's another reason for our faces being this way. And that is that French, and I know Gigi can attest to this, English is more, we speak more with our going back, with our smiles up, whereas French is spoken more with our mouths forward. And I think that's actually part of it. And it's interesting, if you look at the facial lines, you can pretty much tell who's French and who's American just by the lines in their faces. I love this cartoon. This really cracks me up because you can see that we have many faces, whereas the French tend to have pretty much one look, except for getting rid of all of us, which is just a joke. That's all it is. Don't worry about it. Another really interesting aspect, though, to negativity, smiling and negativity versus positivity, is that we tend to see the glass as half full and they tend to see it as half empty. And this, again, I believe all this goes back to the difference in our legal systems. But when you listen to language, whereas we might say, oh, that's great, the French will say, pas mal. And we might say, is that right? And they would say, n'est-ce pas? And if you make a phone call and you get a receptionist, in English, they're going to tell you to hold on. But in France, they're going to say, ne quittez pas. And so you can see how we tend to see things in a positive way rather than the negative way that they see things. And if you watch films, if you see American films with French subtitles, I think you'll see the difference. And it's also the other way around. If you see an American film with French subtitles, it's really interesting how they will see the same thing from a completely different point of view. This is another interesting aspect. For me anyway, I found it fascinating that in the US, your class level is determined by your income. And in the UK, your class level is determined by your birthright. And in France, the class level is determined by your level of education. Your level of education is probably the single most important thing. And a lot more than, money isn't going to buy you respect, not in France. But if you really want respect, you're going to tell them what schools you attended or how many classes you took or how much knowledge you have about something. So it really changes the way people perceive you. Space, personal space. One of the things we as Americans notice is that when we're walking down the street and you've got someone coming towards you, they will not move out of the way for you. You really have to move out of the way for them. That is their space and they're not wavering. But their bubble is much smaller than ours. We need a lot more space around us, and they need very little space. In fact, there are some figures to this. The typical conversation distance for an American is 2 to 4 feet apart. And for the French, the distance is 1 to 2 feet apart. So you sort of have to get used to being a little closer to everybody. But in spite of that, they don't queue. They will not make a perfect line like they will in the UK. They'll be all over the board and they sort of remember who was in front of them and who was behind them. And sometimes they'll respect that, but not always. In fact, kind of breaking line is one of those system D things that they can be really proud of, how they wormed their way to the front. But if they get caught, you know damn well that the people in the back are going to say, "Excuse me, madame, you're behind me, get there." It starts to become almost a joke for us because once you really see what's happening, I don't even know that they understand what's happening, but we can see it. So it becomes humorous for us. Loud speaking. We're loud. We're loud. We're just so loud. I think that we were taught to speak up and be heard. And because of our space, because we have so much more space between us, because the tables in restaurants are larger, because the decibel level's been put higher, we tend to have very, very loud voices. And I swear it happens to me everywhere I go. The voice I hear above everyone else is 99 times out of 100 an American voice. And we are unconscious of this because we're so used to just being loud everywhere we are that we're not even aware that no one else is speaking that loudly. I was with Janet Holstrand this past weekend in Champagne, and we went to a beautiful little restaurant hotel in a little stone house for an Easter lunch. It was Saturday. And we were alone sitting at a table next to the window, but next to us was a table of 20 people, a family of 20 people. The kids were on one end, the elderly were on the other end, the middle-aged were in the middle, and we could not hear anything they said. They were so well behaved. The kids weren't running around. No one was getting up and doing things. They were whispering among themselves. And we literally could not hear anything they said. And the two of us were just sort of laughing. Oh my God, if that family had been Americans, the kids would have been running around. The parents would have been sitting at the table screaming at them. It would have been a complete free-for-all. But in France, they were perfectly well behaved. And so I just want to please ask people to do whatever they can to keep their voices down and just be conscious of the fact that no one else is speaking loudly. You see it even more so in museums where you will hear nothing. You'll hear no one talking about the art. They are talking about the art, but they're doing it very, very discreetly, and we are famous for our loud voices. Americans working in the French system is definitely going to see some collisions. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're taught to follow rules and we're not, because it's really interesting. The French, you will hear a phrase, le problème c'est que. The problem is, okay, and you'll hear them say it a million times without having a solution. And that's because they were not really taught to find those solutions. They were taught to learn as much as they can learn and follow the rules and take in all that information and then just regurgitate it back. Whereas we will come up with zillions of solutions, maybe none of which will make any sense, but we're free to express ourselves. And so you will see that collision happen in the workplace for sure. We tend to, work long hours and just want to get the job done. And the French are going to follow the rules and they're going to quit at quitting time, period. Not beyond that. There's something called the right to disconnect. And there is no requirement for employees to answer emails after hours at all. So employees can ignore all sorts of work communications, whereas we would never think of doing that, I don't think. I mean, we know that we get emails all weekend long from people who are, wanting to move to France. And we have stopped answering those emails. We are using the French rules basically and issuing an auto response that says we will read your emails, on Monday. But we also know that our clients and our readers expect some sort of an answer in 24 hours, and that's because there is no boundary like that in the US. And quite honestly, it's really a benefit because it means that weekends, nights, and vacation periods and holidays are really respected. And that's one of the big benefits to all this rule following, I will say. But you can imagine what kind of collisions can happen in the workspace because we work very, very differently than our French counterparts. And I hear stories all the time. I had a client who, an American guy who came over here to run a French company. And he sort of had a reverse problem because the employees expected him to behave like a French employer. And he couldn't and didn't want to. And they had to go through a really interesting transitional period to loosen up and ask questions and call him by his first name. And I think in the end, they had a much better experience. But he went through hell to get there. Tout est compliqué. Tout est compliqué. This is true. Part of this, I believe, has to do with this respect for intelligence. Whereas we see the lowest common denominator, they do things for the highest common denominator. And you will find that everything is more complicated than it needs to be, whereas we are always trying to simplify things and make it more convenient. It took me a long time sitting on the floor with the instruction booklet to understand how to work this dumb washer dryer because there was no dry cycle. It does dry, but in order to dry, you actually have to set the washer to wash and dry, and then you have to take the wash cycle off to make it dry. And this isn't the only brand. In fact, I bought an Electrolux recently, and it does the same thing. But at least now I understand it. Now I understand that I have to kind of think backwards. But originally, I'm looking at this going, wait a minute, I know this machine dries, but there's no way to dry. And so be prepared, okay, to understand the most complicated system. And you might need a PhD to figure it out. So here we are crossing the cultural divide. I've been doing it for 3 decades. I think it's the most difficult thing for moving to France. Everything else, getting your visa, finding property, you know, making friends, all of those things are easy peasy. But really understanding the French and how they think and how you're going to fit into it, I think is the most difficult thing there is to do. And, but it's worth it. We have helped thousands of people do it. I can give you a couple bits of good advice. I think, first of all, you should always get professional advice. Don't try to do this yourself because you're going to waste a lot of time and money doing that. It's with us, it starts with a consultation, and we have the resources that you would need for all the different professionals. Secondly, don't let fear get in the way of your dreams. Fear is only the thoughts in your head of what you think the future will bring, but it's illusory. It never exists. It will never happen. It's only in your head. So put it on the shelf and forget it. Okay. Just see it as an adventure. And the other thing I'd like to advise you to do is to replace the word expectations with hopes so that you will never be disappointed. Because one of our tough jobs is to manage your expectations. Things will not be the way they are in the US. They will be different thanks to all these cultural differences. But it's all doable and it all works. And we've got all these thousands of really happy people. And this is who we are. You can subscribe to our weekly Nouvelles Lettres. I write 3 newsletters a week. We call them Nouvelles Lettres. It's a French word that we invented. You can see this on House Hunters International. We have a monthly coffee gathering, which is every month in Paris and every other month in Nice, that we call après-midi. We always have a speaker. They're always fun, and it's a great way of meeting people. We do lots of webinars, such as this one, which is being recorded and which we will post on our YouTube channel. And you can always book a personal or group consultation with me and with one of our staff members, Patty Zadoskis, who I believe is online with us today too. And that's how you get started, and that's how you make it happen. So with that, I'm going to unstop sharing, okay? And now we can open this up for a Q&A. Are we ready for that, Gigi?
Yeah, we're ready. Thank you so much, Adrian. I learned myself a lot of things. It's very enlightening to have your perspective coming from an American side who's been living in the country for 30 years. So it's almost a reverse effect for me because I'm the opposite. I lived 20 years in the country and now I live in the US. So it's always nice to have also a fresh perspective. And I agree with a lot of things. And it was very enlightening when you explained the bonjour effect, the fact that it's the bonjour that is more, I am in your presence. I am here and let's connect together. So I agree. Greetings.
You think that's true, don't you?
Yes, I think also French is a very it's a society that is based on hiérarchie. I have a hard time to say that word in English.
Hierarchy.
C'est très difficile pour moi de dire ce mot-là. Hiérarchie, c'est à cause du H. And it's about rule following. So I agree about the framework, and you need to kind of color within the lines. And the dictate is really big. Me growing up in France, I had nightmares about that as a student because dictate, yeah, it's a really big deal.
Can you imagine I actually did that? I actually held up my hand and said, how is this going to benefit my child? They must have thought I was nuts.
But now I have to say that I'm very particular about writing, and growing up, it will help you. I think there's a lot of critical thinking and analytical skills that has to do with writing as well. So let's open the floor. Let's open the Q&A, whether you have questions, comments, how you want to react to Adrian's presentation. So I'm going through the questions. Julie is asking about the recording. We are going to post it on the AT Frenchies Club, and also Adrienne
on my YouTube channel
for the YouTube, so it will be available on both communities, of course. June is saying that she has attended some of your après-midi, June, right? You want to share a little bit about your experience, June?
Oui, merci. Bonsoir, Adrian. Yes, the après-midi is a wonderful experience, and I attended when the American lady who has the book My Part-Time French Life.
Oh, Lisa Anselmo.
Yes, Lisa. Yeah.
Lisa, yeah.
And then another speaker who was talking about storytelling. That was quite a few years ago. That was really interesting. Yeah. So it's a wonderful community in a very local kind of a cafe.
Do you know we've been doing this literally since 2003? I've held après-midi in the same cafe since 2003.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's amazing.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you and thank you for coming.
Yes, and you have a very strong community, and I can see some overlap definitely between the two communities, between AT Frenchies Club and also your community, Adrienne. Lisbeth wants to know, how did you learn French? How did you learn the language, Adrienne?
Oh, that's really a good story, actually. Before coming, I had it in my head that I was going to come and take very intensive course and be fluent in 3 months, which of course is ridiculous. It's just not going to happen. When I got to Paris, I realized I certainly didn't want to spend all my time sitting in a classroom. And I'm just not that person. I'm just not the person who can have patience sitting in a classroom listening to other people. So believe it or not, I ended up creating a French English conversation group that's called Parler Parlor. I ran it for 20 years. Basically I learned through conversation. A few years ago, it ended because my partner, Elizabeth Crochard, she was retired. I got too busy. We ended up, kind of giving it up. But now, Katie, I see Katie Friedland is on. She's waving right here. Katie Friedland now runs this conversation group in Nice. And she also has she kind of morphed it into what she calls Parler Power. So she's giving classes now in Nice. But believe it or not, I totally learned French through conversation. I do not read or write. Okay, I never took lessons. It took me many, many years to feel comfortable in speaking. Now I have no problem. I am told by the French that my French sounds really good. I don't believe them. I think they're just, I think they're just buttering me up. But it does, I will say that it makes a big difference to be able to speak French. But I don't want anybody out there to be intimidated by having a low level, because almost everyone, especially in the major cities, speaks some English. And you can really get by as long as you're sort of comfortable with your own level, even if it's low, as long as you make an effort, you're going to do just fine, and you'll pick it up as you go along. Don't you agree, Gigi, that it really is about just kind of letting loose, letting go, and feeling comfortable?
Yeah, and I think that as long as you try your best efforts, I think it would go a long way. I always tell students there's a difference between accent and pronunciation. The accent, you're not going to be able to acquire the accent unless you are in an immersion space, or maybe you speak the language at home, or you are
Or you're 10 years old.
Yes, and that's why, of course, we advocate for early language learning, because we acquire the language as a child. You're a sponge. But pronunciation is about stretching the right syllables, and making sure that we are understood. So there's a difference between accent and pronunciation. Pronunciation leads to comprehension, and that's what you want. You want to be understood. You want to be seen and understood. So yeah, I think, Adrienne, in your situation, because you moved as a grown-up and you were also in a space where you had no choice, it was also a little bit of a survival situation. Conversation of every day is going to go much further than trying to study from the textbook.
My accent is horrible, okay? I mean, I think it's horrible. They tell me, oh, mais c'est charmant, madame. C'est absolument adorable. They think it's adorable, okay? So I can get away with it. The weird thing, though, everyone learns differently. You know that, right? Everyone has a different propensity for language. So for whatever reason, I can look at a sentence on a page and know every single word and make no sense out of it when looking at it. If I say it, if I read it out loud, then I understand it, which maybe makes no sense. And for some reason, I can really spell. If you put me in a spelling bee, I can spell French words. So I don't get it. But anyway, yeah, I do just fine now.
And you become, have you become a French citizen, Adrienne?
Not yet, but my application is on record, in file, and I'm waiting to hear back from them. You know, it takes a long time.
Yeah, because after 30 years, you are eligible, if
Oh,
anything.
I'm definitely eligible, but you know, you have to go through an interview and they ask you all sorts of, questions about French history and French culture. And I'm not even worried about that because I've been here so long that I'm sure that I can at least joke with them, and that makes a difference, you know.
And they take it before they move from B1 to B2 level. They are going to have they are going to revise the language requirements for citizenship, and I believe in 2026 it's going to become more.
Right. Well, fortunately I could only had to pass B1, and I passed my B1, and I don't even know how it was that I was the first person to leave the room and still managed to pass the test.
That's awesome.
Well,
really nice.
yeah,
So
I felt very accomplished. Yeah, felt very accomplished.
Daniela wants to know, what is the biggest mistake Americans make when buying properties in France?
Not having someone help them do it. No question about it. If anybody who gets themselves into trouble, it's because they went and looked at properties on their own. They dealt with a selling agent who is not going to tell them something that would deter them from buying that property. And then they end up not knowing what questions to ask. So they're not going to get the answers to the questions they haven't asked. And so they basically have taken this upon themselves. The risk is theirs. When they work with us or people like us, then really we're like an insurance policy. It's well worth it. And it's not, I'm not even talking about working with us. As long as you're working with someone who can really hold your hand through the process, who's looking out for your interests, it's way more important.
And that's when you come into play, Adrienne. Of course, to have you as a partner, that makes it's crucial. It's crucial because you already know the system, and you have both, like you said, you cross that cultural divide. So we also benefit from your own experience.
Well, we're not here selling property. If someone comes to us to find them a property, what's important is not making a sale. What's important is finding the property that works for them. So we're going to look at all the negative aspects of that property and remind them, hey, just so you're aware of it, okay, this is a third floor walk up, right? You don't have an elevator. Make sure that's going to work for you. You know, that kind of a thing. We have to really make sure they're making all the best decisions. It's very important.
And we know the difference in the US, the rez-de-chaussée, ça n'existe pas. So
exactly. Now, okay, that being said, I own 2 apartments that are both without elevators. They are both on the 3rd floor. One of them has 70 steps. And I have come to love those steps because they keep me in really good condition.
For sure. And then also the elevators, the lifts are so small in France, and you get used to it.
What, the ascenseur?
Oui, les ascenseurs, tellement petits.
Oh mon Dieu. I looked at an apartment that I got close to buying that had the smallest elevator I have ever seen. And now I've seen a lot of small elevators, okay? I swear it's true. I couldn't fit my body into it, okay? You know, I'm not a big woman. I'm 120 pounds. I could not fit my body, much less any baby. I was in the elevator. I said, okay, I'm not doing this.
Yes. Lance wants to know, how does one decide between buying between Paris and Nice when you love both? Paris being the center of the universe, but I would not want to be there in the summer. So how do you make that decision
What
when
a
you
good question that is. I get this question just about every day. Okay. But I have a scheme for having both. You don't necessarily have to choose between one or the other. So there are ways to make it happen. But I do help people make that choice. And I think that it depends on who they are and what they want out of life and how they see their lifestyle. Because they are two very, very, very different cities. You know, Paris is the cultural mecca of the planet. And if you're into art and culture and you really want a very vibrant lifestyle, Paris is it. But Paris can also be rather exhausting and the weather is not great, right? November to March, it's gray and rainy and it can get depressing. So it's not always the best place to be year round. Nice is what I call a slice of heaven because, you know, it's got the best weather in all of France and it does have an international airport so you can get anywhere. It's very walkable. It's very, everything about it is easy and pleasant. You've got a Mediterranean diet there, which is good. We have a fabulous American community there. So for retirees who have already been there, done that, I would say that they should choose Nice over Paris. If you're younger and you really want to connect with a vibrant American community, it might be better to be in Paris. I had a couple this week from New Jersey, and the woman works for MoMA. She works for the Museum of Modern Art. And I just said, come to Paris. You know, who you are right now, start in Paris. Maybe down the road, you'd end up in Nice, or you'd find a way to have an apartment in both places. But I advise them to start in Paris because of who they were.
True. Raoul wants to know, does the French heritage, because Raoul has his ancestors from his father's side immigrated to the US from France, does that French heritage give me an advantage in terms of obtaining visa for living in France? Do you know that, Adrienne?
Oh, no, I'm not exactly sure. It depends on if they have lineage in France, then they should have a very easy time getting either visa or citizenship.
Raoul, does your family live in France? Do you know that? Have you traced back your family heritage?
Well, but just family living in France doesn't really have anything to do with it, unless you have your parents or grandparents were French. That might change the ability to get a visa or citizenship. We are not immigration specialists, but we work with Daniel Tostado, who's an immigration attorney who's very, very good. And he can certainly answer questions like that. I would highly advise going to him.
What's the name of that person?
Like that. Daniel Tostado. If you go to our website,
okay,
there is a rubric, a menu item
yes.
For immigration specialists, and you'll find them there.
All right, thank you. It's about 4 generations ago, of course, that the family emigrated to the United States, but there's still the members of the family in France. I will talk with them.
I would certainly pose that question to an immigration attorney and see what they do for you.
Thank you. But
it's easy to get a visa anyway.
Right, that's true.
Yeah, it's easy to get a visa. They love us Americans. I know that it's 6 o'clock, so I know our hour is up. But Gigi, if I'm happy to go overtime if
yes, anyone. We have 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Because I know that we have a big crowd. So if you guys want to prolong and ask a little bit more questions, Liz wants to know about the written part. Liz, are you referring to the DEL for the citizenship exam? What are you referring to?
Where is she?
No, sorry. Yes, for the citizenship, if they have a written part of the test.
You mean the French test?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I did, okay? I knew that there was no way I could cram French, okay, into a short amount of time in order to pass the exam. And I was really nervous about this exam. I had such terrible sleepless nights over it. It was crazy. But I found a gentleman came to me, an American guy, who teaches how to take these tests. That was his gig, how to take the test. And believe it or not, they really want you to pass the test. So they have online a sort of a tutorial. They have a tutorial.
Mhm.
Okay, so with the tutorial, he basically taught me how to approach each section of the test. And the one section that was the most difficult for me was where you read like an article, like a news article, and then they ask you questions which were multiple choice to answer, okay, what that article said. Now, American journalism is very clear. It's who, what, why, when, where. We spell out the facts, just the facts, ma'am. It's easy. But French journalism is very different. They hide a lot of the main information within the context. So it's not always very clear. And even he could not answer the questions correctly because of it, just because of our style is so different. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to fail this section. There is no way I'm going to get these right. So he taught me how to look at the clues, how to answer based on the clues, and how not to get hung up on it so that I didn't waste time in that section. So I'm pretty certain that that's the area that I did the worst in, but everything else I passed well.
Oh, that's really
Anyway,
good.
bottom line to this was what I studied was how to take the test rather than the French.
Mhm. That's
I
true.
thought it worked really well.
All the French exam, whether you're taking the French AP in high school, the TCF, the DELF, the DAL for the citizenship, yes, it's very well structured. Usually, it's administered by also the French government, so it's easy to know the structure, and that's why in the club, that's what we will prepare you for too.
But they do the tutorial. They offer the tutorial. They want you to pass. So all that fear I had was for naught.
Yeah, like you said, it's in your head.
Exactly. It was totally in my head.
Alors, Carissa wants to know, what are the biggest mistakes people make when renting in France?
When renting?
Yes, renting. That's right, Carissa. Yeah, renting.
Mistakes
People
they
do
make
that.
when renting. You know, Katie, Patty and Katie, my team are here. What do you think are the biggest mistakes in renting?
One mistake is having the expectation that when you rent a property, it is going to be beautifully repainted, cleaned, ready for you to go. It's really important to realize whether we're talking furnished or unfurnished. We do what we call an état de lieu. So we do a walkthrough, and during that, all of the marks and scrapes and chipped paint here and there, well, they're documented. They're not changed, but they're documented.
So bottom line is expectations.
Very
Again,
much, very much so.
bottom line is
Probably the biggest
expectations.
thing. Yep.
Right. Exactly. See, that's the foundation of it. Exactly. Thank you very much.
So do an état des lieux ahead of time, just like to make sure that, yeah, everything is as, if there's trouble or anything, you have kind of an update of
Well, you
the
do the same thing when you buy a property. We call it a walkthrough. Basically, before you buy the property, because you buy as is, it is whatever is there is what you get. So you have to accept it for what it is. You can't ask the landlord to fix anything.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Right.
Every month at the 80 Frenchies Club, we welcome a guest speaker. So this month is Adrian. And fast forward, I see Janet. Janet also, I just want to have a little plug because Janet will be our next guest speaker in July. So Adrian, thank you for the recommendation because I just got your book, Janet. So I'm just gonna read
Janet's
it,
book is
get
great.
ready. And then it's perfect. I think the theme about how to demystify the French is an extension of Adrian's presentation. So we look forward to that, Janet. Thank you for being here today. I just want to close our webinar today because at the club, we do have another class following the first hour, intermediate class. So I'm going to ask the club members to stay with me. Unless you have other questions, Adrian, thank you so much. I will let you go and you never go. This is recorded, so I will share with you, Adrian, the link to post it on your YouTube.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
You know how to contact us. It was wonderful to have both communities linked and connected. There's a lot of overlap. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very, very much. It was really fun, and I hope this was helpful.
Absolutely. I've learned a lot myself. So please, club members from AT Frenchies, stays with me for the second hour. We have intermediate. So you're always welcome, Adrian, to stay with us for the intermediate class. Otherwise, I will see you soon, Adrian. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Have a great
Thank you.
day. Thank you so much. Ciao.
Super. Alors, I'm going to stop the recording up, and then I'm going to start again a new recording for intermediate. Alors, attendez. Voilà, voilà. Tac. Record it to the cloud. Stop recording. Super. Alors, ça marche toujours. Beaucoup de gens qui sont partis. Super. So it was so nice to have both our communities join together because you can see that Adrian's community and AT Frenchies communities, it's a lot of overlap. We have a lot of francophone, francophile with a big expat community and also English-speaking community. So welcome. So I see Marjorie, Inette, je vois Yulila. Alors, hop, tac, tac, tac.